Madison says, "Hi, Mike. I'm struggling to interpret Judges 19, verse 2 and 25, on why the concubine suffered abuse. Some have said God was punishing her for adultery. How do I understand this without reading into the text?" You know, I taught Judges a while back. I say a while back. Sometimes I do this. I'll be like the other day, and I'm thinking of something that happened like 8 months ago. This a while back was like 16 years ago. And I one of the first books I really taught. I taught the book of Judges, and I remember this passage. I mean, I've looked at it since then, of course, as well. But this is where in the book of Judges, the further you get in the book of Judges, like the more wicked everybody gets. And we're used to reading stories where you read about Daniel in the lion's den and you're looking for a hero and you're like, Daniel's the hero. You read about Elijah, Elijah's the hero, right? I read about these different guys, Jeremiah's the hero, or at least the closest thing we have to a hero in these stories. Often you're like finding a hero. Judges starts to like subvert this because we have heroes that are flawed in other parts of the Bible, but here in Judges, you just have times where there's like no heroes at all, right? Like Samson's a deeply flawed sort of hero, right? Jephthah, he's a deeply flawed hero, right? The further his story gets, the worse it gets. The beginning is like, oh, hero. And then it's like, oh, what are you doing? You're a horrible person. Like Samson. Then you've got Gideon, who's a deeply flawed, later in his life, hero earlier in his life. But Judges 19, it's like, no, they're all losers. And that, I think, is your interpretive grid for Judges 19. Let's read the passage. We're going to think biblically about everything. Well, that requires reading biblically while reading the Bible and drinking water. You guys notice my cat picture? I took that picture like right before the stream. I was just walking around the house looking for, with this little Bible Thinker note, BibleThinker.org reminder, and then looking for a cat. And I found Mika, and she happened to yawn when I was doing it. She never shows up, rarely shows up for a stream. Of course, they both rarely show up nowadays for whatever reason. They don't like you guys. But I thought it was fun. Okay, let's read through this passage and then we'll talk about the story. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Okay, that's not, this is before the time of Saul, before the time of David and all that. A certain Levite who was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, and you might be like, oh, he's the hero. No. Who took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. So someone who has, basically, he sleeps with her, but she doesn't have the full rights of a wife. Okay, is this a good thing? No, it's a bad thing. He's not a good guy. And his concubine was unfaithful to him, as if he was faithful to her. But she was unfaithful to him. And she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there some 4 months. So the plot begins. He's this Levite. He's like, I'm going to go back and get my concubine back. She's been unfaithful to me. I'm going to go get her back. So then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back. He's going to talk her into returning. He had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys, and she brought him into her father's house. And when the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. And there's this weird story. The father and the Levite. And his father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay. And he remained with him 3 days. What are you going to insist you won't? So he stays there for 3 days. So they ate and drank and spent the night there. And on the 4th day, they arose early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after that you may go. So the two of them sat and ate and drank together. Okay, the drinking part's relevant here. And the girl's father said to the man, be pleased to spend the night, and let your heart be merry. So they're kind of getting, it looks like they're sort of drinking a lot together, and they're just doing this day and night, and this is, I think what happens, for people who have like their drinking buddies, there's probably, some drinking buddies who you're like, if I drink with that guy, they're always drinking too much, let's just say. And I think that could be what's part of what's going on there. So, and when the man rose up to go, his father-in-law pressed him till he spent the night again. So he's now getting pushed to where he's like, I'm getting out of here, right? So on the 5th day, he arose early in the morning to depart, and the girl's father said, strengthen your heart and wait until the day declines. So they ate, both of them. And when the man and his concubine and his servant rose up to depart, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, behold, now the day has waned toward evening. Please spend the night. So in the mornings, he tells him, let's just have a little meal before you go. And then he's like, oh, you don't want to leave this late. Just stay the night. And so he keeps doing this to him. Please spend the night. Behold, the day draws to its close. Lodge here and let your heart Be merry, and tomorrow you shall arise early in the morning for your journey and go home. But the man would not spend the night. All that was, I'm sure there's other reasons for it, but all that was partly to set up the stage where the guy's going to leave at a bad time. Traveling in the wild at this time in Israel is not exactly safe. The Judges is a wild and reckless time. Every man does what's right in his own eyes. There's chaos going on in different places. So traveling early in the morning during the day is much safer. You don't want to leave late, but he's going to do it anyways. Why did he do it? Because of this whole rigmarole where he kept getting pushed into staying late. So the man would not spend the night. He rose up and departed and arrived opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. He had with him a couple of saddled donkeys, and his concubine was with him. When they were near Jebus, the day was nearly over, and the servant said to his master, "Come now, let us turn aside to the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." This is before Jerusalem is the Jewish capital and all that. And his master said to him, "We will not turn aside into the city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel." This is an interesting setup. Yeah, you're getting a whole study on this passage. An interesting setup because he's like, oh no, we're not going to trust these non-Israelites. We're going to go over to the Israelites. That's where we'll be safe. They're our people, and they should be safe. And this should be something he can rely on, but he can't because Israel is in rebellion against God. Israel's bad. Everyone's bad. The end of Judges is bad, or reveals everyone's bad. It's kind of showing the depravity of man. But we will pass on to Gibeah. And he said to his young man, "Come and let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or at Ramah." So they passed on and went their way. And the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. That is the tribe of Benjamin. And they turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. And he went in and sat down in the open square of the city. This is kind of a way of saying, hey, I'm a visitor. I'm a tourist. I need somewhere to stay. But no one takes him into his house to spend the night. Verse 16. And behold, an old man was coming from his work in the field at evening. The man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was sojourning in Gibeah. The men of the place were Benjamites. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" And he said, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah," here we go, "to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and am going to the house of the Lord, but no one has taken me into his house. We have straw and feed for our donkeys, with bread and wine for me and your female servants and young man. So we're not going to need any of your stuff. We just need a place to stay. There is no lack of anything." And the old man said, "Peace be to you. I will care for all your wants. Only do not spend the night in the square." How does that sound familiar? That sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't stay out here. Come to my house. This is a dangerous place. And I think that's part of the point. So he brought them into his house and gave the donkeys feed, and they washed their feet, ate and drank, and they were making their hearts merry. Behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. That sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah too, doesn't it? And they said to the old man, the master of the house, "Bring the man who came into your house that we may know him." And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, "No, my brothers, do not act so," know him as they may sexually abuse him. "Do not act so wickedly, since this man has come into my house. Do not do this vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine." That sounds like a lot too. Now you may not think that's a good idea. I don't think it was a good idea, but it's just telling you this is what happened. I'm going to suggest maybe don't look for heroes right now. Just read what happened. "Let me bring them out now, violate them, and do with them what seems good to you. But against this man, do not do this outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and made her go out to them. Again, this is against her will. He seized her and made her go out. She's not even like offering self-sacrificially or something like that, right? This is done. And they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. Heartbreaking, horrific, evil, sick, wicked, and it just gets worse. "And as morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where his master was, until it was light. And her master rose up in the morning, and when he opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, behold, there was his concubine lying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold." So she's lying there with her hands on the threshold, meaning even when they discarded her, she was still alive, right? And she goes to the door to get in, and they're like sleeping or something. They don't let her in. It's okay if you feel mad about these guys. I do. And her master rose up in the morning. When he opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, behold, there was his concubine lying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, get up, let us be going. But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man rose up and went his way away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife. Parental discretion advised. There was your warning. He took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. I personally think that she was already dead, and he cuts her into pieces, sends her out throughout Israel, and all who saw it, pieces of her, like probably with notes saying, this happened in Gibeah. Look at what they did in Gibeah. Look at the horrible thing that Gibeah did. He's calling out for justice is what he's doing. He's offering evidence, which is, it was not meant to feel like a serial killer type thing, but it was gruesome, but it was also evidence that he was offering. And all who saw it said, such a thing's never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt till this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. Then, short version, chapter 30, Israel gathers together and goes to war with the tribe of Benjamin because of this, and they all slaughter each other, and they kill so much of Benjamin that they're almost like out of people, almost eradicates the tribe of Benjamin because they've overreacted, because this is what people do in a chaotic society. Even when they do find evil, they sometimes overreact, and they want to destroy everybody who can even be said to be associated with that. Like, I don't know, race wars, like that kind of thing. So here's tribe wars. Okay, now to your question. I'm struggling to interpret this passage, right, on why the concubine suffered abuse. Some have said God was punishing her for adultery. How do I understand this without reading into the text? I think you probably know my answer already. My answer is the concubine is one of the things that's clear about the passage. Of course, I say that don't look for good guys because you're not going to find them here. But one thing that's clear about the passage is that what was done to the concubine was wrong. That seems to be very clear, right? They're shocked. They say in verse 30 of Judges 19, such a thing has never happened or been seen. It's clearly meant to be a parallel to Sodom and Gomorrah, where what was done there was evil, right? And so it's something that was done that was wrong to her. She was wrong, for sure. So yeah, was she being punished for some sin that she committed? That's completely fabricated. If you want to say that, well, she did cheat on him. I'm like, okay. But where does the text say that this is a causal, that this is something God visited his judgment upon her in this way? It doesn't say that. Actually, I think if you look at Judges, you back up and you zoom and you look at the passage in the context of Judges as a whole, what you see is God is showing how wicked Israel was. In the book of Judges, like the trajectory of Revelation, right? In the book of Judges, we see that the people of Israel have been called out. God gave them his perfect laws. He then gives them, in the book of Judges, gives them the land, which they don't even clear out properly because of their own unbelief and their own inactivity. And then they, with the land that God has promised, with the laws that God has given, the perfect laws, they still fail so much. And it's meant to point to the ineffectiveness of the law to bring people salvation or to make the perfect society. Jesus is what's needed. All of the anguish and the discontent and the what is going on that you feel towards Judges or throughout the Old Testament is meant to point to how man fails and where Jesus will succeed and how it drives us to the cross. We need Jesus. I think that's the point.